Welcome back to the Birchal Podcast. My name's Emily, I'm your host, and today we're joined by Andrew Wong, the founder of Koba Insurance, which is an innovative company transforming the way that we think about insurance with its pay-as-you-drive model. Andrew, thank you so much for being here today. It's been a while in between drinks, shall we say. 2022 was your last race with Birchal. What's been happening since?
Tons. We've been really busy for the last 2 years, so to speak. We've been putting out new products into the market. We've been up and down hills and valleys and been really challenged with our operational business model and some of our partnerships. But we are out of the forest and we're full on running for the last couple of months.
Amazing. So obviously your business model in terms of the way that you approach insurance for drivers is quite different. Can you tell me a little bit about why you went down the model of a pay-as-you-go or pay-per-kilometre style of insurance?
Yeah, I mean, insurance it's not sexy or fun, right? It's something we've all dealt with and we all have had for as long as we can remember, right? We used to joke that the biggest innovation in car insurance in the last 30 years is seatbelts and then buy online, right? And that's really the only change. But in the last 15 to 20 years, as we all know, tech, data, things like that are taking over the world. That information had rarely been moved into a customer experience or a different way of rating and reviewing and measuring risk. And so what we thought to do was to bring some new data sets into the car insurance game in order to give people a different way to measure the risk and a different way to pay. And so ultimately, we've created a product in a space where we're able to charge people for what they're using. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, if they are not driving the car, if they go on holiday, or they're just low usage drivers, they shouldn't be expected to pay nearly as much as everyone else, because if they're on the road less, then they are simply less risk of getting in an accident. And so by bringing that to the customer, we've actually been able to show and get really great discounts for some people. We've been able to build a new service model in a space in insurance where a service model really wasn't there, right? Mm. If you think about insurance, the best relationship you have with your insurer is no relationship at all, right? You don't want to talk to them, you don't want them to call you, and you just want to pay them money every year and move on, right? And in that way, it kind of feels like a tax, right? Yeah, right. And everyone's always looking for a cheaper price because at the end of the day, you just want to get in and out of the service, right? With any data, with any connection, with any convenience, any kind of disruption or modernization in any product, right? We start to use the data to develop a new service. We start to use the data in order to offer something more to the customer. And we're actually building that type of service on top of it. And so what we kind of think about internally is shifting the conversation from insurance to car care. Okay. Right? And that way insurance is just the way in. But ultimately, as an owner, we have an entire journey of caring for the car, whether it is tires, whether it is servicing, whether it is buying a new EV, whether it's getting into a car wash. There's an entire journey, right? And at the moment, there aren't a lot of kind of threads that connect all of the pieces through the entire journey. And the ownership of the car and the data that it has is definitely something that can help us access that. Okay, so how did you come up with this idea in the first place? I'm a genius, right?
Obviously, no. Yes.
No. The telematics and the connected car data has been around for years, right? Mm-hmm. It's been the new coming of age for like 20 years, right? And so since, late 90s, early 2000s, cars have started to generate sensor data, sensor information, and that has always been the holy grail to how should we use this to build a service offer. Mm. It's been used a lot in commercial insurance. Because you need to know where your cars are at all the time if they're in a fleet. If your driver's getting tired, you can use the data and the sensors to understand, how to better get them on the road or take them off the road and optimize which cars are there. Mm. At a personal insurance level, it's a little less so. It hasn't really been used there. So okay. It's being done in the rest of the world. And like in many things in Australia, we're 7 to 8 years behind the 8 ball. And so, we saw really great models in the US and the UK, and we simply brought the offer here.
Yeah, right. And in terms of bringing on customers, how did you go about finding your crowd essentially?
For the crowdfund or for our business?
For your business.
for the business, it's pretty easy, right? Everyone, again, no one loves their insurance company, right? So brand love is not a huge thing.
Right.
And so there is a large portion of the market that is ultimately shopping, right? There are comparison sites, there's content sites, there's information out there on how do we find a better service provider, how do we find a cheaper deal. And just simply by putting yourself in the space, anyone that self-qualifies themselves as a low-usage driver, or within our new product sector around EVs, they self-select themselves into the space because they're shopping, right? Okay. And if you're in the space, if you're in the content, if you're in the comparison sites, you'll be found.
Yeah, right. So you mentioned that you've got a new product coming to market. Can you give me a little bit more information about that?
Yeah, so we are week 5 into a product launch so we are Australia's first and only specialized and dedicated EV insurance provider.
Wow.
So if you look at our core product around low usage and data and connection, you start to go, well, what other parts of the market or what other segments really could use this and are early adopters into anything, right? And EV owners and EV drivers have been early adopters to nice cars, to new cars, to ways of thinking, to new infrastructure, and they've been in this space where they are always working with car data, right? Because understanding how and when to charge your car, understanding the different kind of benefits, a Tesla doesn't have a key anymore, right? Like it's a cell phone to unlock your car. And so they're just natively more comfortable with the tech and the data.
Okay.
And so by taking everything we had, we've been able to move it into product number 3 and put it into EVs, and we've had really great reception from the market. We're growing astronomically. Yesterday we had our biggest day. Everything just keeps moving really nicely, and we're really leaning into the growth and the disruption within the car insurance space.
So it's that natural kind of momentum essentially when you've launched this product. Do you feel like you're getting on board new customer segments, or is it just expanding into your current customer segment?
No, so it's a completely different segment, right?
Yeah. Right.
It's a completely different segment. So it's a sub-segment within the overall, car drivers, right? Because if you're driving an ICE car, you traditionally buy an insurance one way. Sure, regular insurance works for EV drivers, but we've rebuilt the value chain, the supply chain, the service model to really kind of point itself and really suit itself towards EV drivers specifically.
So what is the difference there? Why do you feel like EV drivers need a different kind of insurance?
Yeah, so it's about not necessarily about need, right, in terms of things like that, but it's a service offer, right? Okay. So traditional classic car insurance, you take your car and you get it fixed. Again, you never want to talk to them. You move on, right?
Sure.
In the wider market, EVs only make up about 1 to 1.5% of the total kind of car drivers in Australia. That means all of the processes and all of the ways that they're serviced are thrown into the existing model within the larger organization, right? Whereas something simple like an EV needs tires every 10 to 15,000 Ks, right? They need tires faster because there's a higher torque, and they need tires faster. Also, the repair network, right? We use the Tesla certified network. We take cars directly to Tesla to get them done, to get their certified parts. Ultimately, you need a different mechanic, right? A different someone who understands the Tesla vehicle or even electric vehicles versus an ICE vehicle, right? Because there's no engine, right? You don't need to have them serviced anymore because there's nothing to service. There's no engine, right? You just change the filters every now and then. Further, there's a whole bunch of data in there that then allows you to, there's a bunch of data in there that is required to understand in order to do the charging, right? Because you have to charge your car, you've got to understand how the battery works. Our app offers all of that math, so it allows people to kind of get a better service within there. And then as it continues to grow, we'll continue to offer to new cars, new models, and then ultimately, bring in a service very specifically designed for EV drivers.
Okay, cool. So obviously this is what you've been doing for a while now, Andrew. What's your background? How did you come to be where you are today?
So I've jumped back and forth between startups and small business and corporate businesses, right? I think like many people in your 20s, you kind of think you know enough and you're like, I can do this all by myself, right?
Yeah.
And you go and start a business and you do it by yourself, and you succeed to a certain point and you fail miserably to a certain point, right? And then you go back and forth. But from an early age, my parents were always, always had side hustles. I mean, I was the kid going to the airport, right? And you find the little shop, the trolley at the airport, and rather than paying $3 for the trolley, you go get one from the inside and sell it to someone on the side of the street for $1. You're like, I got the trolley for free, and I made $1, right? It's fun stuff like that, which I think my family was always taught us and kind of encouraged. But this is probably my fourth or fifth business that I've owned. It's probably my second startup in terms of fundraising. In 2016, I had the need to go and run another business, so I picked up the family and we moved to San Francisco and lived there for 4 years, trying to kind of be at the heart of it and really kind of see how it was done.
Sure.
We've been back and forth from big corporate business. I was the global head of digital for a big corporate business as well for a certain amount of time, lived in London. At a certain point, you decide to get off the ladder, right? And you decide to kind of take a shot and make it work yourself. And I think, when you know an industry really well, you can find the places and the spots that are easy to disrupt. You can find where the solutions are, and you're not so much inventing or making something up. You're bringing solutions to the market that you know is needed.
Okay. So in being a founder, if you've been through the ringer with a few different businesses, what have been the main challenges that you've faced?
Outside of the normal business challenges of, product market fit and research and things like that, I think the two biggest is ultimately just ongoing self-belief to know that, the solution that you're creating is going to fit the market somewhere, right? To trust in your research, to trust in, the thing that you're building, the people around you to take the product to market, right?
Okay.
Building that team is absolutely essential at the beginning, making sure you get the right people. And then subsequently, not even your team within the business, it's the team outside of the business that also is helpful. Okay. I've done this a couple of times, so I understand how to live cheaply, right, when you're starting a business. But and it's certainly really easy to do in your 20s. But in your 30s or 40s, when you have a family, it's slightly different again. And having that team around you outside of work in order to support you to do that, in order to help you make the pieces work, whether it's grandparents taking your kids to and from school, or whether it's a really supportive partner that allows you to kind of go away for 5 or 6 days in order to stand at an event stand handing out brochures, right? When classically you could be getting in and working in a corporate job, playing it safe, right? And so having that team inside of work and outside of work is such a core challenge to get right, because without it, the whole thing fails. Sure.
Do you have days where you sit there and you think, why did I choose this instead of my other?
No, not at all. Like there's so much fun in this, right? Like it's the other way around. Like for me, always sitting in the corporate business, there are days where you go, why am I here, right? Like there are often in the corporate business and quite large international ones, half of what you do is politics, right? And then a new manager or leader will come in and it'll change it. Strategically, you're headed in the right direction to do this and that for a customer, whereas a strategic decision around an M&A or some sort of other kind of growth in a new product launch then changes the strategy, which no longer is about the customer, it's about the growth of the overall business, right? Yeah. And so things like that, you kind of go, well, why am I even putting the effort into this? Like, if not for the customer, then why do this, right? I was in a hilarious event a couple of years ago in insurance, and this large insurance company stood up on the stage and they were talking, and it was great and it was really interesting. And the guy said, look, over the last 5 years, we've really turned our focus to be very customer centric in the way we operate. And in my head, I'm like, but your company's 100 years old. Like, what have you been doing the other 95 years? Like, if not for the customer, if not to build something, if not to make someone else's life easier, or, why even do this thing, right? Sure. And I think in a corporate business, you often get to that space where the business is the importance as opposed to the product. And coming back into doing this in startup or small business world, where product and customers is 150% of what you do, it's fun.
Yeah, right. So coming from working in a large corporation, what do you think the learnings are that you've taken from that you've brought into your business?
So
whether good or bad.
Most small businesses are built off the back of a founder or a person and their ability to move, right? Their ability to solve a problem on the fly. Okay. Corporate business builds structure, right? builds really clear gates, really clear prioritization, really clear understanding of when to do something and when not to do something. So much so that, and you need this when you have 10 or 20,000 employees, or you have, businesses in different product lines in different countries. You need that structure in order to approve, to get things done quickly and to understand how and when to do it. And so that is absolutely needed in a small business. And I think one of the key differences between small businesses and growth businesses is the ability to level up, right? And one of the great things around some of the most successful startups that you see in the news and things like that are often created by guys or by founders who are able to operate and run a small team, which is less than 10 people, then operate a team of 30 people, and then operate a team of 100 people, and operate a team of 1,000 people, right? That leader is completely different at each step. Right, and the best businesses that grow are the people that can transition between those steps.
So right? Adaptable and flexible.
Yeah. So I've got a really good friend at the moment who's an absolute superstar in software, right? And he's rocketing up the ladder for ages. Took a break, tried small business, and at a certain point, it was just like and we talk a lot about it. He's like, well, what do you do at this stage? I'm like, well, these are the things you need to be looking at. And I was like, well, what do I do at this stage at the big business side? And he's like, well, these are the things you got to look at, because running a team and expectations is completely different, even though, the net goal is the same. Sell some stuff, make people happy, get a good product, like all the net benefit is the same. But the way you structure it and the way you are accountable for the result is ultimately different. And so that's what the big business allows you to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there something that you would see in the big businesses that you would completely try to avoid altogether in running a business now?
I was lucky that the big businesses that I worked in were pretty lean, right? In one of them, we called our marketing managers and marketing people that we were like, you're the general manager of the business, right? And some of the greatest things is they were young, kids to an extent. Like they were 25 years old, maybe like 3 years in the business, running $10 and $15 million brands.
Wow.
Right? Because they had gone through the 3 to 4 years worth of learning, and they were then trusted in order to do it, right? And so the only way that you can run a $10 or $15 million brand is if you have a really clear understanding of the priorities and how to execute within that structure. Mm-hmm. If you went to a founder and said, here's a $15 million revenue-based business, most of them would fall over, right? Because they're too busy solving every problem as opposed to a team of 30 people in order to run it, right? Mm-hmm. And so those things are definitely important to bring into your business, but it's also important enough to know as a founder when you have to have your hands on all the pieces, right?
Sure.
And when you have to do everything, right? And at the moment, as our business is growing, we have a great ops team. We've gone from, our outbound phone calls have gone from like 5 to over 150 a day. And so for the last 4 weeks, I've been on the phone. Outbound phone calls like 6 hours a day, right? And you get through it. But not only is it just doing the job, what's ended up happening is sales has gone up, which is awesome. But now we really have a really clear understanding of what the customer wants, because you're on the phone every day talking to everyone, right? And so the product development over the next couple of months will fall directly in line with what we've learned. Right, and so being able to do the grind, but also taking the benefit out of it in order to take it to the next level.
So obviously your business is super customer centric. How do you get input from your customers to then advance your business and adapt it to the customer needs?
So we've got probably 3 main ways. Outbound phone calls, right? Simply because we're on the phone every day talking to customers or prospects rather, and getting a lot of information from them is hugely valuable. Another one is within our marketing, we have what we call the Koba Pit Crew, which is effectively most of the early adopters, many of the crowdfunding people that came through from the Birchal, that we send out emails and information to and literally run surveys. And we're like, hey, over the next 3 months, we are thinking about building A, B, or C. Which one do you think is most valuable? And they'll go, well, we think B is good or C is good. And you pull it together and you go, cool, we're going to build B, right? And it's almost that simple, right? And you go to the people that have supported you and that use the product and you just ask them what they want next. Right?
So from doing the Birchal raise now, you'd have hundreds of shareholders. You did one in 2021 and one in 2022. What have been the most unexpected benefits of having those additional shareholders in your cap table?
I don't know if there's any unexpected benefits, but I think the benefits that we thought were going to be definitely played out.
Great.
Right? So as a consumer business, the first place, within one of the main reasons we did it is because with the fundraise also comes customers and advocates and loyalists and friends and referrals, and the number of people in the first 18 months and even still now who are like, oh yeah, I use this, or my cousin told me about you guys, or my cousin invested, my friend did this, and my friend did, and so all of that word of mouth happened immediately off the back of the crowdfund, and still continues to this day. And so whenever we have a product push or an update, the 650 crowdfund investors that we got are the first people to get the information from us.
Amazing. And have you found that they're super eager to get involved, and have any of them even joined your team in any capacity?
No one's joined the team, but we pretty actively ask for feedback, and they send it, and they happily send it back, and wherever we ask, and they and even often it's unsolicited, but it's all relevant because they're thinking about it from a different point of view, right? And so we take it pretty seriously. When they send in the feedback, we really do look and review and update the pieces that they've looked at. Often it's things as simple as a content change on the website. They're like, oh, this is a little bit confusing, right? Or, hey, I was thinking about this, or my cousin went to buy this and it did this, right? And we're like, yep, you know what? That's actually a relevant point. And often we go and just go, yep, fine. One piece of feedback from someone we trust would change some of the content on the website. Bang, done, right? And then a lot of the times then we just build it back into the roadmap of the product.
Okay, amazing. So obviously you've just launched this new product 5 weeks ago. Do you have a kind of vision of what the future is going to look like in the next 2 to 5 years for Koba? It's kind of asking, do you have a crystal ball, isn't it? Because how would you know what's going to happen with technological advancements? Would you have thought that we'd be here now? Would you have thought that EV insurance was something that you were going to put into play at this point?
Yeah, so when we did the crowdfund, I think the answer would have been no, right? Because we were pretty sure on the low usage, low mileage space in the market, and that's where we wanted to be. In the last 4 years, our business has taken the core concept of the low mileage and the tech-enabled and the connected car and been able to partner with very specific transport businesses that use the telematics and the connected car data. We've been able to jump into a market like EVs where the connected data is seen as a benefit, right, and something that people use on the regular. The transport industry as a whole is slowly, maybe not even slowly, but quickly changing, right? 2 years ago, EVs were there was maybe 50,000 EVs in the country. Now there's nearly 250,000.
Wow.
Right. In the first quarter of this year, 9.7% of all new cars sold were EVs. So roughly 1 million cars a year. And so it's changing quickly. And so EVs are expected to be about 1.5, or EVs and plug-in hybrids and battery electric vehicles are expected to be about 1.5 million cars on the road by 2030.
Okay.
At the moment, it's 250, right? So naturally, if we just follow that, like our goal is simply to be the EV specialist, like the EV guys, right? Oh, I bought an EV. It's like, oh, have you checked out Koba's Insurance? They're the EV guys. They do something specifically for it, right? And if we follow that along, then we have a really nice growth path just within that space. But there's also, the wider things like what's happening with autonomous vehicles.
I was literally just about to ask you that.
When's that coming? How's that working? Hydrogen cars in theory are coming, right? There's a lot of things like that are on its way, right? And so where we will likely stay is on this leading edge of new transport, hoping to be the first to launch an autonomous vehicle product here in Australia and a hydrogen vehicle product in Australia, and to ultimately update the service models to work specifically for those types of products, right? And so we hope to be in that space, right, as we continue to grow. And then from there, who knows, right? There's so many different options that within the transport space that you can go to.
What helps you to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what's coming up next and, what's going to be the new innovation so that you are ahead of the curve and ahead of your competition?
There's no real rocket science to it, but one of the lucky things about Australia is almost in everything, we are 5 to 7 years behind the rest of the world. Yep. And so, the autonomous vehicles insurance, as an example, has just been, the company just launched it in the UK. Right?
Great.
And so we actively watch what they're doing, and we look at their product, and we go, interesting, right? And then we just try and time it with here, right? And when you talk to some of the larger companies on when they're bringing them here, you talk to some of the vendors that are looking to do them, and you can line it up and go, cool, if you guys are planning that for next year, we'll probably do it at the end of this year. Another good example is what's called vehicle-to-grid insurance. So there's a theory where your car has a battery, and most people in Australia have solar, or lots of people in Australia have solar, and the solar power comes in and washes straight back out into the grid if you don't use it.
Okay.
Right? And there's a concept where you can buy a home battery and stick it in your house, you can fill it up, and at nighttime you can use the battery from the home battery, right?
To charge a car.
To charge your house, to charge
Right.
the power in the house, to use any of the electrics, right? The concept that's happening out in Europe is ultimately that the car becomes a mobile home battery, so you can actually bring the power in from your solar, store it in your car, you can then use the power from your car to run the big things in your house, right? So that's happening already in the UK and Europe, right? There's already conversations about it happening next year with some energy companies. So there will ultimately be a gap with how do we insure this? How's the involvement of the car comes? And by no means do we plan to be the vehicle to grid retail guys, right? But there's a role for an insurance player to play in there, right?
Yeah.
And seeing it come down the path, we can easily be part of the conversation. We want to be part of the conversation. We want to ultimately help find the solution. And the other side of it is that, within Australia, there's so many big businesses in Australia within banking and retail and, finance and insurance that there's a really good, solid part of the market that, the innovation space just isn't being catered for. They're catering for the 22 of the 26 million people in the country, right? So it gives us a space to play within that innovation to find and service early adopters.
Okay. So I know that in the last budget announcement, there was a significant portion of that going towards hydrogen production and storage. Can you give me a little bit more information on the hydrogen-run vehicles? I haven't heard about this. You can't.
No, I don't know much about them at all, other than that things like, the energy density in a hydrogen car is considerably higher than an ICE vehicle. It's higher than in EVs. The battery replacement is likely to be easier, but the reality is that it's taken us 7 years to get to where we are with EV infrastructure and charging and everything like that. Hydrogen has limited to no infrastructure here, right?
Yeah.
So whether the argument is they are good, they are bad, they're going to be a part of it, or whatever it is, in the short term, well, not even the short to medium term here in Australia is we just don't have any infrastructure in place in order to enable them, right? And so they will be used in specific and isolated situations. Just like, Tesla's been in Australia for 7 years, and EVs have more or less been in Australia for 7 to 8 years. And we've only got 250,000 cars on the road now, with the infrastructure still behind.
Yeah.
Right? So in order for another style of vehicle to come, there will be infrastructure requirements.
Sure.
Right? So I don't know what that means for hydrogen. I don't know what it means for the cars, but, we continue to actively watch and wait, and when there's an insurance opportunity, we'll try and stick our hand up and get there 6 months before everyone else.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really interesting to hear how you are able to harness the fact that Australia is so behind to advance your company. And is that a key recommendation that you would put forward to other entrepreneurs?
So I've always been personally, so as you can tell, I have an accent from the US. I've always been fascinated with expanding and scaling things that work, right? And so it is very, very, very difficult to invent something, right? To invent something that doesn't exist, right? You have to be a super genius to come up with something like that, right? In order to solve a problem with an existing solution from somewhere else and just be better at growing it and scaling it and marketing it and bringing that solution to the market is something more people can do, right? So, in that case, looking to the rest of the world to find out where the problems are and the solutions are is fantastic. And similarly, and vice versa, there are lots of problems and solutions that we've created here in Australia first and then taken to the rest of the world, right?
Okay.
And it works in both directions. And so understanding the size of the market and the opportunity is absolutely key. Something like insurance and cars insurance, we're applicable to most of the market, right? 20 million cars on the road, there's a big market there for you, right? Selling something to even just homes, for example. There's only 8 million homes in Australia, so you're only going to grow there's 8 million homes. That probably means there's 16 million toilets, right? Like if you're selling toilets, like there's only so many toilets that you can sell, right? You've got to take it internationally, right? And the whole idea being is find a solution that works, right? And then make it work for your consumer or your customer, whether it's here or internationally. But the whole idea and the focus of growing a business is to grow that solution, right? I've always kind of steered away from inventing things, and that's often, I find with startups and fundraising and things, where one of the biggest problems is because the big investments are almost always for someone who's inventing something, which is great, and that's the whole point of things like artificial intelligence and things like that. Like, it doesn't exist, and it's super complicated, so you need a ton of money to do it. Most businesses, and which is why Birchal is so great, is a business that just needs to expand, that needs to solve the solution, that already has a great customer base. They need investment in order to grow, right? And so in which case, getting a couple $100,000 or $1 million is exactly what you need, right? And it goes back to that other scale side. Like, if someone gave you $50 million to raise your business, like to run your business, they're expecting to take $500 or $750 million out of it, right? Like, there's only a certain type of person that can run that size business, right? And so, there's got to be a really clear understanding of where your solution comes from to match the funding that you want, to match the customers that you're trying to help.
Okay, so in terms of funding, obviously you've been down the Birchal route twice. What benefits do you see in raising funds from the crowd versus traditional funding?
So traditional funding in Australia is a really interesting space, right? There's been a handful of phenomenally successful companies here, Atlassian, Canva, things like that. And so the big VCs here in Australia have all effectively been in on those, right? And so they're extremely successful. Their portfolios are great. They've had great returns for their partners. They also then have access to investments all over the world, right? And so what I think a lot of Australians businesses forget is that you're not playing on a level playing field. Just because they're here in Australia doesn't mean they're just investing in Australian businesses, right? And therefore, your product or whatever you're pitching has to be better than whatever the other guy in San Francisco or London or Israel or is pitching, because that's where the solutions are coming from, right?
Right.
And if you are on that level, awesome. There's a really great, VC, market here, and really great funds available to get. If you're not inventing or on that level, then looking for funds from small family offices or from private investors or places like Birchal is great, because to get a business running, to be successful, to raise, $300,000, here in order to get, a company from $1 million to $10 million worth of revenue, means you have a business that's doing $10 million worth of revenue. Like, that's awesome. That's super successful, right? And in those types of businesses, this type of platform is phenomenal, because then you can get the money in to do the things that you need to take care of the customers that you want within the market that you have.
Sure.
And if it's then a stepping stone to something bigger, great. At that time, go after the bigger things. I think one of the things that has been really eye-opening for me that we had to figure out for us at the beginning is, as much as insurance is big, it's ultimately not sexy. And our insurance product would never go beyond the Australian shore, right? And so in which case, a lot of the venture funds that we thought we would be open to weren't necessarily there, because they're looking for international expansion, because there's only 20 million cars in Australia, which is great, but there's another 120 million cars in America, and there's another 300, like there are just more, and so that's the solution that they're trying to get to, because it's infinitely scalable, right? And so, a platform like Birchal was phenomenal to help us get off the ground, to help us get customers, to help get early adopters, for people to go, yeah, that's interesting. Looks like a rock solid business. Insurance, can't go wrong with insurance, right? Berkshire Hathaway love insurance, so we should invest in that too. And also I have a car, so I may as well, get insurance from them too. So it ticked every box for us, right? And was an absolute, game changer when we decided to do it. So, which is why we did it twice. If we've raised funds again as we grow, we'll do it a third time.
Amazing.
Just bringing customers into it is key. It also, in a sense, if you're the type of business, and this isn't on our radar, but if you're the type of Australian business that's ultimately looking to go public, right? I think the prerequisite is something like 50 or 500 shareholders or something like that, right? It already puts us in a space where we already have them. We have the people there. We're already in that space. You're already operating like, your compliance for a larger business is already there because you have so many shareholders. and it puts you in a really good place to kind of, be in the Australian marketplace.
Yeah, that makes a whole heap of sense. And I think setting yourself up for that eventual potential exit is really, really smart when you're starting from the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. In many ways, yes, you have to know where you're going. I think that saying where you have to think about your exit is often misleading. It's not so much you got to know what your exit is, because as soon as you know your exit and that's what you're chasing, then you trying to ignore the other half of the people that are trying to invest. Because if you're trying to grow in order to exit into a sale to another company, then at a certain point the customers then don't. They're like, oh, well, what are you actually trying to solve a problem for us? Or are you trying to just build a business and pump and dump it and make some money and move on?
Yeah.
Right? Or are you trying to grow it just for the customers, in which case then the investors, the big investors, want to know that you are building a business so they can exit, so they can get some value when the shares are sold, right? So if you go after that, it's a little, in my opinion, it's a little misleading. What you actually should be, what the saying ultimately is you need to know where you're going, right? You need to know what the next milestone and the next 3 milestones are, because I guarantee on almost every single startup, when you start, whatever milestones 3, 4, 5, and 6 are, when you're at 1, will not happen, because you're going to have to change a little bit, right? When we started, we had no clue we were going to go to EV, right? We made that decision literally in a weekend. We went to an event, we're like, holy shit, this is going to work. Like, it ticks every single box, and there's a need, and we did the research, and within a weekend, we just said, this is the new focus, right? Like, and so we still had our key products, but all of a sudden, everything we were building for A suddenly made more sense for B, right? Okay. And so all of those learnings help you get there. And so without really having a clear direction of the product and the tech and the things like that, and knowing where you're going, if you have a clear understanding of that, it allows you to move into where the opportunities are.
So essentially, the kind of learning is looking too far into the future can actually hold you back.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of founders are trying to get into it for an exit because they're trying to get rich, right? It's the worst reason to be in this, right? Like, you should be in it because to solve problems. You should be in it because you want to take care of your customers. You should be in it in order to actually, make a difference and make a change. All the rest of it comes, right?
I think that's a really good learning, particularly for investors. And it's a question that comes up quite regularly from investors on the Birchal platform. They say, what's my return on investment looking like? What's the exit strategy? What's going to happen there? And it's simply something that founders at that early stage can't answer, because it is so speculative. It is so far in the future potentially. These are kind of these medium to long-term investments where you know that you're going to invest. Your investment's going to be illiquid for, maybe 5 years beyond that. And I think that's a really good learning, not just for the founders, it is for investors as well. And investors should be ready to come along for the ride because they also believe in the product or the service that the founder is presenting to them. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. A lot of they often say it at the early stage, like, you're not investing in the business, you're investing in the founder, right?
Totally.
And you're investing in the founder to go, actually, that person's smart enough in order to get us to the end, right? Like, to get us to a place of safety, to get us where the ship and the boat is, nicely out in the ocean, sailing in exactly the way it needs to be. Whether it's sailing on the left or on the right or in the middle, that's always going to change. But choosing the founder in order to get them there is the key.
Yeah, I completely agree. And listening to you talk about how you're doing 6 hours of phone calls a day, was it like that during your Birchal raise? You're just operating a call center on the phone to as many people as possible to introduce yourself as a founder? I
mean, the CEO stands for Chief Everything Officer, right? Like, you just have to do everything. And then as you build a team, you're building the team in, and the people that you're building them in a way that you trust and to get the job done. But, in many ways, I think there's a small business saying, or not, Richard Branson saying, or something like that. It's like, you don't hire people to tell them what to do, right? You hire people so they tell you what to do to help you get to that next space. And so, you do have to be able to do everything. But if you do everything, you're doomed, right? And so it's about understanding the metrics in order to get there, in order to create the success. Again, with a lot of our call center stuff, on the sales side of it, because I'm naturally a salesperson, we wouldn't have the right scripts. We wouldn't be able to get the sales if we didn't do it, right? And you've got to do the hard work. And so I've got young kids, right, 6 and 7, and are saying to them all the time, it doesn't matter what it is. It's like, do the hard work and you'll get the result, right? Whatever it is, whether it's reading or learning or playing video games. Like, if you do the hard work, like, you'll get there, right? And people often say work smarter, not harder. Like, it's not that, right? It's not that and it's not just hard work. Like, you have to do both. If you don't do both, you're doomed, right? But if you don't do the hard work, you're never going to get there.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've really learned from founders that I've spoken to, is that they have tried every role in their business. So when they do expand their team and they hire more people, they have that learning and understanding of what they're going through on a day-to-day, which I think is invaluable. Is that something that you feel like on a day-to-day you'll have a chat to somebody who might be doing a particular role and you sit there and go, yeah, I've done this before. I understand what you're going through and I can see the key challenges here, and you can help guide them as a leader to overcome them?
Yeah. You definitely have to have a really clear appreciation for all of the roles and what everyone's doing. But, if I knew how to do everything, then, again, we'd be only going as fast as I could do it. Right. And so you need to be able to bring people in who have the key amount of experience. Again, so we're an insurance business, right? And I'd only been doing insurance for 4 years beforehand. And there's only so many things that you can learn within insurance. I totally knew how to do growth and acquisition and brand and all those parts of the insurance game. But I'm still young in insurance. I've only worked in it for 8 years. Like everyone else around me within our team have been doing it for 25, right? So it would be silly of me to go and say, hey, I can appreciate what you guys do and you should do it this way. That's ridiculous, because they'll just look at me and be like, you don't even know what to do, right? But the key is we understand what the function of the role is and the part of the business and the structure, and going, okay, cool. In order to get to X, these are the things that need to be done. Don't care how you do it, right? These are things that need to be done. Again, going back to the phone calls example, right? In order to get the phone calls in, we know how many phone calls we have to make in order to get to the conversion, to get to the number of people, to get to the number of messages that you leave in order to convert it within the next couple of days. Put all the metrics down in place and you go, cool. This is what you got to do. This is what we got to do. And again, that structure helps you get to the place. So it's not so much an appreciation of doing their role. It's more of, as a team or as a piece of the puzzle, this is how we get to the finish.
Okay. So you're kind of hiring people around you who might be, I don't know, not necessarily smarter than you, but just more experienced. They've gone through different things.
Easily everyone is smarter than me where we work. And I'm not even joking. I'll go into the meeting, everyone's like, great, this guy, right? But no, the key is it's not smart or experienced. It's the right people, right? Like there are, like in everything, like it's any relationship, right? Like you can meet a great person in the pub, but if the timing isn't right, then it's not going to work, right? It's the same thing in any business, and what the people that you have around you have to be the right people, and the experience and the way you work and the style that you work, and and in the time of their life and willing and ready to take a chance in something like this, right? Again, there's so many people that could be phenomenal in startups. My friend, for example, they're just not at that stage in their life, right? Or maybe and you, again, all of those things come into play on when you're trying to find the right people.
Yeah, right. And have you ever found a time where you've hired the wrong people? Yeah. And what have you learned from that?
Hire fast and fire faster, right? It's a small business. We're a team of 10 people, right? And so one person, one cog in the machine that's wobbly throws everyone else off, right? And so you've got to have the person perform within their job and what they do and all those things. But then if they're taking from other people rather than adding for other people, right, then you got to move on, right? They may be capable, but if they're not adding to the team, what's the point, right? Like, and what we talk about, like we're full on car insurance. When we talk to a lot of other people, they're like, they often ask how big the team is, and I don't like to share or tell because they look at you strange. They're like, you can't do that with 10 people. I'm like, yeah, you can. You have 100, and there's no chance your 100 people can do it as efficiently as my 10 people, right? Like, it's always about the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way you talk about the adding to the team versus subtracting from it makes me think of, it's the essential bank account of the company, right? They're making withdrawals or they're putting in deposits. You want to have more deposits going in than withdrawals. So if you've got an employee who's just constantly withdrawing from the team, you're never going to move forward. You're never going to be increasing the amount of wealth.
That's with every relationship, right? Like friends, right? You've had tons of friends on your journey of life, but still today you're probably only close with 5 to 10 of them, right? The ones from your friends from your 20s, there's probably a handful that you keep, right? Because over time and distance and things like that, like if they're no longer adding, then
They're subtracting.
Or maybe not subtracting, because often you move, right? And they're great friends at the time, right? And at that time they were adding, which is great, which is, as you get older, you can be lucky to have some really great friendships. But if the people that you meet, are then taking away, or relationships with an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, like if they're taking away from you, not adding to making you a better person, or challenging you to do more, or pushing you to a new space, like, at a certain point, do you really need to have them around? And I think that is one of the kind of key differences in most entrepreneurs and founders, is that they're always trying to do more and get better, right? And so they're always looking to bring people in who have succeeded in places they have, that have challenged in places that have equally failed, but by adding new people to your pot, which often are not your friends or the people you bump into at football, or because those friends are for that reason. But if you're trying to grow your business, you need the friends, or the people around you who have been there, who have done it, who have failed, who understand the pain that you're going through. One of our best investors so far invested in us because he goes, oh yeah, I see all those problems, I solve those, you'll get through it. And at the time I was like, this is ridiculous, we will not get through this. He's like, no, you'll get through it, because you got this, this, and this. That's fine. Just keep hitting the phones. Like, you'll do it, right? And you kind of go, well, how did you have so much faith in us? He's like, I've done it, and I got 2 other friends who've done the exact same thing, and you're made of the same stock that they are, right? And they're like, if you just keep doing this, you'll get through it, right? And it's people like that in friendships and in mentors and in your team that you need to be able to bring to, that continue to add to the team.
Yeah, feels like you just came full circle. What you were speaking about the very beginning of our conversation about having that self-belief, and sometimes you just need one person to sit there and say, no, I know that you can do this, and I know that this is going to succeed. And it feels like you've had that in your team, which has been really valuable.
In the team it's great, and we've been even luckier to have it with some of our investors. One of my guys, he's hilarious. Like he's a career investor, and he's done very well in investing in small businesses like ours and growing them from $1 million to $50 million in revenue, and just he goes on the ride. And his saying to me was, he goes, I want to be like your favorite uncle, right? He goes, I will give you everything, right? Anything you want, I will be here for you, but you got to call me, right? Because when I'm not with you, I'm not thinking about you. You're not my kid. I don't care about what you do, right? But I will help you to the end of the earth, right? If you call me and you ask for the help. And then, so he's been phenomenal, because there are times where we've just been low. I'm like, I just need someone to talk to. And then he just pumps you up for absolutely no reason. And then you go on. Or then at times, and he's like, yep, you need some more money? Fine, we'll go get 3 of my buddies and we'll chuck some in, right? And it's just, at the time, they're there to help and support and to add, right? And it's been great having guys like that around.
Yeah, amazing. I'm really excited to see where Koba goes in the future. I think it's been a phenomenal journey up until this point, and I wish I did have a crystal ball and I could see where it was going to go in the future, but I guess we're all just going to have to follow along. But thank you so much, Andrew, for coming in. Really appreciate you spending the time with us and educating everybody on what it takes to be a founder.
Thanks. No problem. My honor to be here. Thank you.